Why the housing crisis will only get worse. Let's have a look. Hello everyone, Florian here and welcome to another episode of Heiser Says. Grab your hashtag not sponsored cheap coffee. You can tell I'm getting too lazy to fill the stein at the moment. And I want to look at a reason to why the housing crisis and the rental crisis is only going to get worse. It's not going to get better. But before we have a look at this information, a viewer sent me a clip from a youngish lady, probably in her 20s, maybe early 30s, who was concerned that she was about to be made homeless because her rental agreement wasn't about to be renewed. They weren't giving her much notice, which doesn't seem right. And, well, she was worried because she started looking for places. And there were hundreds of applicants for each property that she was looking at. And, well, she was understandably scared and upset. Now, there are a few things that seem a bit dodgy there. The fact that, well, she wasn't given enough notice that they weren't being renewed, which you're legally required to. And we're only hearing her side of the story. But one thing I noticed was that she had a channel where, it's typical YouTuber stuff. You can see back to their content and what interests them. A lot of it was like cleaning and prepping and minimalism videos, like she'd clean her whole house and do all these videos. But it was only her. It was only one person. And that really drew my attention to an issue I've been hinting at for some time, but just been too lazy to find any information on to share with you. The demographic shift that's occurring in households in Australia. This is one of the fundamental reasons, one of the pillars of the housing market. When I say pillars of the housing market, some people seem to mistake it as me arguing for, why house prices are so high or good, or how the government is sustaining it, keeping them high. That's an unintended consequence of a series of policies. This isn't, I would hope, and I suspect it's not a systematic plan by our political leaders to up the price of their shitty investment property. Now, don't go down that path, guys. They're not that competent. What we're seeing here is a significant change in the size of households in Australia, and it's probably a lot bigger than a lot of people realize. And that's going to have an impact on meeting enough supply for the demand that is out there right now. Because you can be concerned about the significant migration driving up population sizes and that increasing demand on housing. But we need more smaller houses. And, if you're doing a development, if you're doing a project, you want to maximize your return on investment. You may need to just to make the project stack up. You're going to build a little tiny house, or you're going to build one that the market demands with all the bells and whistles. We've looked at this before, just the changes in house sizes from the 60s to today. We all know it's gotten much larger. So let's have a look at this data while I have a shot of my not sponsored coffee. Okay, so this is from the Australian Institute of Family Studies, and there's some really interesting data coming out of here. This is just from July 2023, so it's pretty relevant. We can see here. Let's start with some of the key messages. So this research snapshot outlines some key changes in the population, households, and families of Australia over the last 4 decades, with some of the trends going back before this time. This research snapshot is mainly based on Australian censuses. Australia's population is getting bigger and older. It's also become more ethnically and culturally diverse. Most Australians live in the capital cities, which we've discussed as well. 50% of people live in Brisbane, Sydney, and Melbourne. I remember my father telling me when he came to Australia, he immigrated from East Germany, and East Berlin actually, and he picked Melbourne, because it was a big city. He liked the climate, although we ended up in Queensland eventually, where his cousin picked Adelaide. Got off the boat, worked for Holden. Anyway, the population growing faster in these cities than the rest of Australia over the last decade. Yeah, we know that. Households have become smaller, with more than 1 in 4 households being occupied by one person. One person. So let's look at this another way. Does a single person living by themselves need a huge house? When my father passed away, my mother was in a 3-bedroom house with a double garage and a pool. She didn't need that size. She needed to downsize. She had a smaller house, which is much more manageable. The body corporate handles cleaning the pool and all those issues. And then she can get invaded by all her grandkids and loves it. So here's the thing. How many people need one house? Need a whole house themselves. When I was single and living alone by myself, my swinging, fantastic bachelor days. And what is it? I was in a little 1-bed apartment above a convenience store, which is probably perfect. It's actually pretty big. So there's the thing. How many people are occupying entire houses when they don't need to? This young lady who was in the video complaining and nearly in tears, maybe rather than struggling to find a house, she needs to find a room. I mean, didn't we all house share when we were younger? Isn't that something we all did? Hence why I ended up in my own apartment, because I got a bit sick of it. But, you know, it's a part of life that you need to go through. It's a rite of passage. Has that disappeared? Australia's households have become more diverse over time, with increasing proportions of First Nation and immigrant households. So, I mean, this is a funny one with the increasing First Nations or Indigenous Australians. We must be doing a fantastic job that their population has grown so well. I mean, does that align with the other health outcomes? There's been a decline in families with dependent children, but an increase in couple-only families, especially older couples. Okay? I mean, older couples, well, that's when the kids move out, or is it the young dinks, dual income, no kids? Over the last century, Australia's population has experienced a significant change in size and composition. The 2021 census revealed that Australia's population has reached 25.4 million, doubling from 12.7 million in 1971, and quadrupling from 6.6 million in 1931. I mean, there you go, guys. Okay, this is why housing in the 70s was a different price to the 2000s, 2020s. Look at that growth, guys. Can I change it to a color that isn't weird, rainbow color? There we go. I mean, look at that. Population growth comprises natural increase, number of births over deaths, net migration. I'm going to break these up. The impact of migration on the Australian population has been significant, contributing to a very multicultural population. I mean, okay, awesome. But is that's look at this growth here. How much of that is hidden? GDP declines. GDP per capita has been below trend since the GFC. GDP's still been going up. We haven't been in a recession by that measure, but it's still been going up, but below trend. One could argue that's depressed or hidden the state of the economy. Really, it's a two-speed economy. You're either doing well in Australia or you're kind of not. I think that's going to be exacerbated by, well, some economic challenges that we may see moving forward. The trend in population size has been disrupted in recent years, with travel restrictions through the pandemic having a large impact on migration numbers. Yeah, but it's bounced right back. It's bounced right back. The population numbers for 2011 and 22 are shown in Figure 2. And the components of population growth summarized by year from 2011 to 21 in Figure 3. This figure confirms that the usual migration stopped during the pandemic, leaving leaving population growth to only reflect the impact of natural increases. So this is the natural rate of population growth in Australia. And this is what migration is fueling. So regardless of your opinion on it or your political stance, you can see here what's going on. What's driving the growth in our population here in Australia. And there's a lot of political insistence to keep this going. It's not going to change. Not from the two major parties. The minor parties can hoo-ha and make a fuss about it and maybe make some populist opinions on it, but there's a lot of... One advantage we at least have compared to other countries is that the quality of immigration, the people that we're getting here, we're a little pickier than some of the other countries. They'd love to have the immigration policies that we have. So we need to ensure that those, those strategies and policies are maintained. You want to encourage people that migrate over here, study, get degrees, get qualified, raise families, build houses, build futures. They're the type of people that we want. So net overseas migration was close to zero in 2020 and 21. So widespread over the country. Widespread over the cities. Australia's population is spread across states and territories. Figure 4 shows that more than half of the population was in 2 states of New South Wales and Victoria. 1/5 of the population was in Queensland. Yeah, but where are they in those states? Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane. And we'll have a look at the Southeast Queensland Regional Plan, or part of it in a moment, showing you where they're planning growth. All of these things are why, if you're sitting there in Melbourne expecting prices to come tumbling down, I know it's unfair. I know prices are bullshit. I know you all want to go back to the 70s and live get houses cheap like the boomers did. But guys, look at the population of Australia at that time. How many significant bigger cities do we have since then? I mean, Brisbane didn't even have indoor plumbing then. People were still shitting in bloody outhouses and using tank water. We're talking about a different world here. You're talking someone living in a crappy timber cottage, which is like my house, and cramming the kids in the veranda. Okay, so there's a reason why stuff was cheap back then. It's cheap and cheerful. So, Figure 5 shows the majority of the population housed in the capital cities. Where's this? Figure 5. Okay, here we go. In the capital cities. Oh, this is a good chart. We've got to have a look at this one. So New South Wales, 65%. Victoria, 76%. Queensland, 49%. So we have the majority. That's why we're a rural state. People living outside of the capital, I don't blame them. Western Australia, shit, look at WA. 80%. 80%. And think about how much economic activity is driven by these 20%. With all the mines and everything. SA, 78%. Tasmania, 44%. So the majority. Tasmania is the most rural state, shall we say. Which isn't surprising. I mean, Tasmania is beautiful in the country. ACT, 100%, doesn't really count. Northern Territory, 60%, 40%. So it's up there. But still, I mean, there you go, guys. This is where people want to live, in the cities. So when you see a map of Australian people, go, it's so big. Why aren't people living in the middle of nowhere with no access to infrastructure, crappy internet, shitty food? You go out the country and you think, oh, probably naively, that people would have access to all this wonderful fresh food. No, it's all trucked back and forth from the city. Population growth is consistently higher in capital cities. I mean, well, yeah, of course, you want to move where the infrastructure is. You want to move where your kids can get education, where they can do dancing school, where they can play soccer on a team, where they can go to university, where there are jobs, where they're not going to be influenced by a bunch of their, country cousins that, let's say, are bored out of their mind and resorting to what do you got, a meth epidemic? But then the city life comes with issues too, doesn't it? So growing older. Australia's population has become older, reflecting long-term changes in life expectancy, as well as changes in fertility patterns. An indication of this is seen in Figure 7, with the decline in the share of the population aged 0 to 14, an increase in the share aged 65 and older. We can see that. I mean, look at this here. So young people, 81 my year, it's gone down. Look at since 1911, it's gone down. Boy, 4.3%. So back in the day when they said, oh, sure, you get a pension at 65, 60 years old. Now it's the same. I mean, shit, no wonder they need to raise the pension rate, guys. Look at this. So here you've got the working people, holding it all up. It's going to get expensive. It's going to get expensive. This is a problem too. You kind of want this This is showing long term. No, this is showing why they're bringing immigration into the country. Why this guy here is not going to stop. Because they need to import. We need to keep a tax base to maintain this quality of life and the expectations for this older population. So if you're advocating for a decline in migration in the hopes that it will dent house prices and make them more affordable, how is the government going to justify the decline in services to this large voter base here? It's not going to happen. This is the thing. And you can argue, oh, well, maybe we've got to cut this, cut that, cut that. You can. It's fun to argue for these things, but to actually get the Australian population on your side for that is it even possible? We're not a country like America. You don't have a strong individualistic self-reliance in Australia. It's not the same. We're a different culture. So let's have a look. Here we go. We can see, okay, it's not as bad as some other countries. The size of and age of Australia's population growth has grown considerably over the past century. By age and sex in 1911. But look here, 1911 is a pyramid. Now the pyramid is getting fatter and thinner at the base. So here's the problem. This is the issue. This is where you've got long-term population decline eventually happening here and here. It's going to happen on the whole world eventually. Population is going to peak as people have less children. That's just what's going to happen. You'll see a competition between different countries to get more migrants to move to their countries to ensure they have a tax base to provide the services that their population expects. I can't see that changing in the foreseeable future. Ethnically and culturally diverse. I'd like to see this change over time. You know, what it's been and how it's grown. I mean, awesome. This is the thing. If you come and immigrate to Australia, but you culturally adapt to the expectations of our country, that shouldn't cause any issues. The problem is when you've got a multicultural society with people clustering off into their own groups, not mixing, not intermarrying, cultures not merging and changing, then you've got issues. And there's significant historical precedent about that. You don't want Australia to turn into Yugoslavia, do you? So, in 2021, the top 5 countries of birth of those born overseas was England, 3.6, India, 2.6, China, New Zealand, and the Philippines. There you go. Come on, Germans, you don't even rank anymore. Ah, boy, I guess the times have changed. Australia's cultural and ethnic diversity has been apparent for many decades, although changing immigration patterns have seen vast differences over time in arrivals' countries of origin. For example, 10% of the Australian population in 1981 were from Northwest European countries. By 2021, that proportion has fallen to 6%. By contrast, immigration from Asian countries has been on the rise during the period, with immigration from Southeast Asian countries as a proportion of the entire population increasing from 1% to 4%. Growing First Nations populations. There were 812,728 people who identified as First Nations, Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander, in the 2021 census, representing a 3.2% of the Australian population and increasing from 2.5% in 2011. That's a huge increase over a decade. That is an insane increase over a decade. Now, more people are probably getting comfortable identifying as Aboriginal, Torres Strait Islander. That is, or looking into their heritage and their history and finding out that, okay, hundreds of years ago, or maybe not even 100 years ago, there's a family link there. That's what's driving this increase. This isn't people in Indigenous communities having huge families all around the country. This isn't a sign that the quality of life issues and the differences in human development index between rural populations of Aboriginal Australians and Torres Strait Islander Australians and those of us living in the city has been addressed. We haven't bridged the gap. Okay, so we can't successfully say, look at that fantastic population growth. They're doing so well. It's not a sign of that, sadly. Now here, this is the biggest issue with regards to what seems to become the focus of this channel over the last few years, and what interests a lot of us, is household prices. We're seeing a huge demographic shift. With population growth, the number of Australian households has also significantly increased. According to the 2021 census, there were 9.275 million households in Australia. This compares to an estimate from previous years of 8.26 million in 2016. Okay, so from 2016 to just 2021, 5 years, half a decade, we've gone up what? Nearly a million households? Am I reading that right? In 5 years, 1 million households. So over those 5 years, we need 1 million new dwellings to accommodate those households. And where are most of those people wanting to live? In our capital cities. Where's property prices in the rental market going through the roof? In our capital cities. While the number of households has increased, the average household size has declined. Figure 10 shows the household size fell from an average of 4.5 people in 1911 to 3.6 people in 65 to 2.6 in 2001, 20 years ago. Slightly lower at 2.5 in 2021. So we can see, here you go. Look at that. So we were building smaller houses back here with bigger households, where now you've got bigger houses. And how many apartments are being built with one bedroom? Who wants to buy them? You never buy the one bedroom. You always want the two bedroom at least, because you need to rent out that other room. But then no one wants to house share because they're all too good for it. But this here is the big driver, everyone. Right here. Not only is our population increasing, but our household size is decreasing. So we need to, as those of us in the construction sector, need to be aware and deal with this changing demographic. The fact that we've got this move to smaller households, that this is going to put pressure on our housing stock. Bigger houses, a single person renting a 3-bedroom house, that's not necessary. They don't need that space. They may feel like they want it. But that was probably built back here when houses were over 3 people per household. So the family, the mum, dad, and 2 kids, it's being replaced or met with the single in the house, which is pulling this down. The change in household size reflects the changing distribution of household compositions. Households are grouped into 3 basic forms. Family households, comprising families where members are related by blood or marriage. Adoption, step, or fostering, who reside in the same household. These made up the majority of households in 2021. Individuals living alone in 2021, more than 1 in 4 households, 26% were occupied by one person. Groups of unrelated people only made up 4%. So this is the house sharers. This is the rite of passage that we all need to go through. I want to see a chart of this over time. Has this decreased? Do people still do this? But look at this. 26% occupied by one person. How many of them do you think are in 1-bedroom apartments? A household may contain more than one family, though multiple family households are uncommon. Less than 2% of households have 2 or more families. The trends in household composition since 81, shown in figure 11. The greatest changes happened between 81 and 96. So over the period of 81 to 2021, family households remained prominent, although declining from 78% to 71%. One-person households increased from 18% to 24%. This proportion was slightly higher in 26. It's trending up. This is the issue, guys, right here. And frankly, I think it's going to get worse. I was talking to a young guy at church the other day. I was sharing the story about how I met my wife. It was at uni at the computer labs. And, because I was asking him if he's got a girlfriend or is he meeting one at uni or trying to, meet someone at church. And uni's different these days because you'll have people, he didn't. Architecture had an advantage. We were all in the same classes and is going through in cohorts. He's got one of more the generalist science degrees where everyone comes together in random subjects. So it's harder to meet people. And apparently they don't go to the Red Lounge or the Red Room or whatever it is at UQ anymore that much. But you've got people doing classes at home, remote, not coming in, not meeting. What's going to happen? It's all going to be the swipey app crap. Shit, I'm so glad I found my wife before all that stuff started hitting the ground. Further analysis of one-person households found that women living alone outnumbered men living alone. That's probably because they're older, live longer. Of persons living alone, 55% were women and 45% were men. Women living alone had an older age profile compared to men living alone. One half of women living alone were 65 years or older compared to 1/3 of men living alone. So the majority of men living alone are under 65. I wonder how many of them are from failed marriages. The proportion of one-person households in Australia has climbed over the past 40 years. There you go. Look at that. This is going to put demand on our housing stock, guys. This is going to impact the rental market right here. Okay, this is going up. This is another one, another pillar of the market. Demographic shift is happening. ABS defines First Nation households with at least one usual resident who identifies as Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander. There were 352,000 in the 21 census, representing 4% of all households. That the proportion of households has steadily increased, less than 1% in 81, rose to 4% in 2021. This trend is consistent with the increased representation of First Nation people in the Australian population we can see here. Look at that shooting up. Now, I'd like to know where these households are throughout the country. More immigrant households. I mean, that's not surprising. We can see the immigrant composition is changing. But, I mean, guys, we've seen that from the population growth. That's just the way it is, guys. I mean, I technically, growing up as a kid, would I have been an immigrant household? Yeah, I would have been. German and Austrian parents, I would have been considered an immigrant household. And we only have one kid. There you go. Oh, my mother got bang for her buck. One kid, 7 grandkids. Yeah, she's really gotten a return on investment. I don't think she expects that. She tells people how many grandkids she has, and then only later does she explain that it's all to one child. Figure 14 shows that family households have remained the most common household forms, with 6.73 million families across Australia, according to the 21 census. This count of families in the census focused on who usually lived with when household members identified that they were related. Okay, so we can see here family types. So couples, whoa. Are dinks the biggest? No. Shit. They are. Dual income, no kids are the biggest family type in Australia at 39%. So how many of those dinks need anything more than a 1-bedroom apartment, maybe a 2-bedroom? How many of them are in bigger houses? Couples with dependent children, 36%. One-parent families with dependent children, 10%. Couples with non-dependent children, 8%. I mean, here you go. One-parent families with dependent children at 10%. This is why you're never going to see a decline in funding for childcare. It's a huge voting block right there. Couples without children. It's a huge voting block right there. One-parent families with non-dependent children, 6%, and other, under 2%. Noting the earlier data of the age-related changes to the population, some changes to the distribution of family types are to be expected. Figure 14 shows the trend from 81 to 2021. So we can see here couples with dependent children, we have tanked. Couples only have gone up. Oh boy, I mean that's... Having children, everyone, changes your entire perspective on life. It really frames things very differently. You see the world very, very different to when you had children or when you didn't have children. In many ways, some would argue, and the older I get, the more I agree, you're not really a grown-up until you've had kids, until you really have had other people completely dependent on you. Perhaps this is why we're seeing such a hedonistic cause for government paternalism here in Australia, this shift. Couples with non-dependent children, okay, older couples. So this is This is kids moving at home to save up for a house right there. And that's gone down. I thought that would have gone up. One-parent families with dependent children, it's gone up and down. But it has gone up over time since 81. 81 is not that long ago, guys. Okay? This is my life. This is the geriatric millennials, demi-boomer demographic right there. Okay? So since when I was a kid, families have crashed and dual income couples, I'm assuming dual income, you'd have to be to buy a house in Australia, has skyrocketed. Now, this could be the younger population not having kids. Maybe they can't afford a house. So what do you think? Let's theorize a little bit. What do you think is going to happen with our immigration policies if they see this growth here? Younger couples aren't having kids. They're just all putting it off later and later. Sadly, sometimes too late. They don't tell people how... We're not really educated, at least we weren't back in my day at school, about how sharp your fertility window decreases the older you get. When you're young, women, you got like a whole week or so when you're fertile. The older you get, the time frame when you can actually conceive during your cycle decreases. I think down to a day the older you get. You got to target that right. Or just have shitloads of sex, one way or another. But my argument is it's going to be harder for these people if they're putting off having kids before they jump into this cycle, because just the way life is, biology is. If they're waiting to get into a house. This is another problem, an unintended consequence of the housing being so expensive, because I can appreciate why people don't want to jump into kids without having stability, and that's what a house is. Now, okay, so there we go. That's this research here. Notice how they've released it. Households shrink as more people are living alone. And I thought we'd have a look at this little guy here, just to look at some of the cool charts here. This is from the Southeast Queensland Regional Plan. Okay, this is my area of where I'm living. Okay, this is all there is in Queensland. There's nothing to Queensland past this line. Whatever people tell you, that nothing exists out of this box. At least that's what people seem to think. Now you can see here, the urban footprint. And one thing that's very interesting, and we'll go through this in another video, is where they're targeting housing growth. They want greater density, single dwellings, low-rise, attached dwellings. They want to fill this missing middle here. These guys have a greater diversity of stock, but they're not releasing much more land in this plan. Where do we have it here? Priority development areas, so PDAs, out near Springfield, Jimboomba down there, which wouldn't be too far. That's where they're developing. Up here, Strathpine, a little bit too. Housing ain't going to get cheaper in Queensland, guys. Sure, it may fluctuate, but long term, and I'm talking demographic, our lifetime, we'll look at this. It ain't going to happen, particularly the population growth they're predicting. 2.1 million new residents in Southeast Queensland by 2046. Okay? There you go. And if we see these household shifts continue for the next 20 years, okay, say this line goes up here in the next 20 years, that line continues to go down. If we're looking at this going up, maybe 45%, what do you think that will do to housing stock? So let's have a bit of a chat about all of this, guys. So there you go. This is what I consider the 10th pillar of the housing market, the demographic shift that we're seeing here in Australia. This is a long-term trend. This is why immigration to Australia is not going to decrease. Neither of the two parties are going to dare to touch this, because it's going to, significantly inhibit their ability to provide the services and hoover up the taxes from the younger people that they need to maintain those happy voter bases. This is why the shift to one-parent households, we're not going to see any decrease in childcare subsidies that are going there. They're going to fight for that voter block because they need to. Australia's changing, our demographics are changing, and we're seeing that manifest in the housing sector. It's not going to... It's another argument I'd put forward as to why we're not going to see a calamitous crash. guys. And when I talk about crash, it's not, oh no, housing is down 10%, whoop-de-doo. This is people who are predicting a 50% fall back in 2019. I mean, something has to drastically change. We have to see a significant decrease in the population growth driven by migration to Australia, and probably a shift in household composition over time. Do you think that's going to happen? Do you think suddenly so many Australians are going to start going, you know what, I want to have a big family? They might if they could afford to have houses. But we'll have to see, guys. Thanks for watching. Let me know your thoughts and opinions on this one. Take care, and I'll see you at the next episode of Heiser Says. Bye for now.